Hello everyone. In this video, we are going to learn about concatMap, which is one of the flattening operator. concatMap maps the value from the source observable to the inner observable and emits the flattened value sequentially. Let's head to the VS Code and try out an example. Before we begin, I just want to let you know that we are going to use the same example that we did for the Muzz map. And thus, we're going to reiterate the initial part wherein we use the URL and the Ajax creation operator to get the data. So feel free to skip this part if you have already read about the Muzz map. Cool. Now let's start with it. Now we have created a very basic index.html file. We are using RxJS version 7, and for styling, we are using Tailwind CSS. I've created a JavaScript file and the same is referred here. Let's save it. Head to the browser. You can do a quick refresh. Cool, nothing in the console. Let's close this. For this example, we'll use a placeholder URL that basically fetches information about the user based on an ID. This is how it looks like. The path param is just an ID, which is an integer. And if you make a GET request with this ID or with this URL, you'll get the information for the user. Now, let's use the Ajax creation operator and invoke this API. We'll start by importing Ajax. Ajax equals to RxJS.Ajax. Now let's create our observable. User observable equals to Ajax.getJSON. Then we can pass the fetch user. Let me add URL to it. URL. Let's create our observer. Next, and we'll just log the next notification. Console.log. Next is value. Finally, we'll have our subscription mechanism. So user object, our observable dot subscribe. Then we'll pass the observer. Great. Let me just increase the font size as well. Awesome. Let's save. Now, if you see in the browser, we'll get the response, that is the user JSON object for the ID 1. Now, let's assume that instead of calling this hard-coded API, we have an array of user IDs that we receive from an observable. Maybe that observable talks to an API and retrieves it. However, for now, we'll just assume that these IDs are returned from a from creation operator. So let's write that. Before that, let me import from creation operator. Const user IDs equals from, that is an array, right? And also comment this out, this as well as this. We'll reuse the same observer. Now if you add an observer to it, now we can do user ID, the observable dot subscribe, and pass this observer. Let's save. You will see the IDs being logged from the next notification. Now for each of these IDs, we want to get the user information. So let's use .pipe. And herein we need to pass our operator. We'll start by using the map operator. Let me import that and then eventually replace it by a flattening operator. But let's just see what's the response we receive in the next notification when we use the map operator. Map will get those IDs and then we'll call Ajax.getJSON. Now instead of having this ID hard-coded here, let me remove this. So we can say fetch URL, user URL plus ID, right? Let's save. Now, as expected, we'll receive the observable returned from the Ajax.getJSON invocation. We are not going to receive the user JSON as we received earlier. In order to get the right information, we need to use the flattening operator. Now, replacing map with a flattening operator may it be must map, switch map, exhaust, or concat, right? It depends on your use case. So each of these operators have a different kind of behavior. While we used merge map in the previous video, we got to know that all the inner observables are executed at once and the order is not guaranteed, right? It will execute one, maybe three, then two, right? It depends when the inner observables gets completed. Since we are learning about concatMap, I'll use concatMap here. Just to reiterate, it depends on your use case which one to use. See what's the behavior of each of these operators, right? And whether they match your requirement or not. Cool. Let us start by importing concatMap. concatMap. And in here, we'll replace it by concatMap. Hit save. Now you can see we received the user JSON instead of the observables that we received earlier with ID 1, ID 2 and ID 3. If you do a quick refresh, again IDs 1, 2 and 3. Let's try refreshing it again. Is the same thing. And that's because concatMap preserves the order and the order depends on how the values were emitted from the source observable. Your source observable emitted the value in the order 1, 2 and 3 and thus the output here is basing on that order. That's why 1, 2 and 3. If you change the order here, let's say 3 to 1, save it, you will see the same order in the response as well. So concatMap preserves the order. Let's head to the slide and understand it better. So we have an observable that emits value using the from creation operator. And we also have our observer. The source observable emits a value, say 1. concatMap maps this value to an inner observable such as an AJAX observable that makes the HTTP request. While the first AJAX request is still processing, the source observable emits another value, say 2. Unlike merge-map, concatMap won't immediately map this new value, but rather wait for the inner observable created for the value 1 to complete before starting the next inner observable. This ensures that each inner observable is processed one after the other. This concatMap will only map this new value to an inner observable after the first inner observable completes. Once the inner observable for the value 1 completes, concatMap maps the value 2 to a new observable and starts processing it. And thus the inner observable, the first inner observable completed, your observer received that value. Now while the second inner observable was still in processing, the source observable emitted the third value. Now as we know, the inner observables are processed sequentially. Since there is an active inner observable, the inner observable for the third value would not be created, rather be queued. As soon as the second inner observable completes, this value will be received by the observer and then only the third inner observable will start executing. And once it's complete, the value will then be received by the observer. So since concatMap processes each inner observable sequentially, the order of emissions of these values from the source observable is preserved in the output. The observer receives the value in the order of their emission from the source observable. Thus the output for ID 1 followed by ID 2 and then ID 3. I hope this helps to clarify how concatMap works. So that's all about concatMap. Please do remember 3 key pointers about concatMap. Mainly that concatMap handles each of the inner observables in the order they are mapped. So these observables will be processed sequentially. And since these are processed sequentially, the order of emission of these values are preserved in the output as well. So the order is guaranteed and it depends on the source observable order of the emission. That's it for this video. Thank you. Meet you in the next one. Until then, happy coding.